Imagine strolling Brazil's famous coastline and feeling the Atlantic Ocean move in uninvited, seeing the sea, walking the boardwalk, and approaching the mirrored buildings, and wiping out in minutes the little sand that was left. For decades, the central beach of Balneário Camboriú lived like this. A billion-dollar real estate showcase built on fragile ground, where the tide reached the sidewalk and in some areas hit the concrete directly, until the city decided to do something rare, rewrite its own coastline in 2021. The dredger Galileo Galilei anchored off the shore, connected to an extensive line of pipes stretching for almost 6 kilometers. It began pumping sand from an underground deposit to the beach. In just 2 months, more than 2 million cubic meters of sand were extracted, creating a wide, stable, and controversial stretch of sand. Set aside the next few minutes and find out with us how Balneário Camboriú Beach was redesigned and why this transformation goes far beyond the sand. Balneário Camboriú is on the central north coast of Santa Catarina, between Florianópolis and Joinville, with the central beach stretching about 5.8 kilometers along the shoreline, between the mouth of the Camboriú River at Barra Sul and the Marembaia River Canal at Barra Norte. Before the project, this 25-meter-wide stretch of sand was inadequate for shoreline real estate development and for the tourist pressure of a city that sells itself to the world, like the Brazilian Dubai. After the widening, the profile increased to about 70 meters along the length of Central Beach, creating a much wider stretch between the sea and the boardwalk. However, the numbers go beyond width, far beyond. In just over 2 months, reports add up, pumping about 1 million cubic meters of new sand, using the dredger Galileo Galilei and a network of more than hundreds of pipes. Previous studies of the project mentioned up to 2.7 million cubic meters planned, and a width ranging from 65 to 75 meters, reaching 90 meters in some initial sections. But why did a city decide to alter the coastal region this way? What exactly was at risk before the new sand arrived? Balneário Camboriú's expansion began not with the dredger, but with the storm surges. Over the years, the combination of high tides, stronger waves, and an increasingly narrow strip of sand created a scenario well known to the residents. Loss of beach, the sea reaching the sidewalk, and areas like Barra Sul practically without any sand on rough sea days. From a technical point of view, the studies that supported the PBA, Basic Environmental Plan, pointed out 2 specific problems. Recurring erosive processes along the shoreline with damage associated with high-energy wave events. The need to protect the city's economic engine, which is based on high-intensity tourism and leisure. The estimated investment is 51.8 million Rs. It's worth noting that the 2019 bidding set a ceiling of 85.1 million Rs for drainage and hydraulic landfill. The execution was consolidated at 66.8 million. At the same time, social and economic pressure was growing. Vertical development was increasing, tourism was advancing, and the image of a squeezed beach stood out with skyline real estate. Beach nourishment became a strategic way to provide more sand for beachgoers and extend sunlight hours on the beach, something that satellite images began to record after the project, reinforcing the protection of the shoreline against extreme events. But turning an environmental plan into a real project in the middle of a densely populated city is a different story, especially when the intervention doesn't end with the last cubic meter of sand deposited. Why? While the beach was expanding, a new challenge began to appear silently: how to control the behavior of this newly arrived mass of sand. When the dredger Galileo Galilei arrived off the coast of Balneário Camboriú in 2021, the engineering plan had already been drawn up years before. In the environmental studies and the basic project, the logic was clear. In artificial beach nourishment projects, first, the offshore underwater deposits are defined, located dozens of kilometers from the coast, with sand compatible in grain size and the pumping route to the shoreline. For Central Beach, the PBA planned for underwater deposits 12 to 15 kilometers away and landfill execution using a self-propelled dredger. In practice, the operation was concentrated into just over 2 months of intense pumping. About 2.1 million cubic meters of new sand were deposited along 5.8 kilometers. By opening alternating beach sections to reduce seasonal impact, the process becomes almost choreographed. The dredger sucks up the sediment from the deposit, stores it in the tank, and sails to a point near the coast. From there, the pipeline comes into play, hundreds of segments laid out along the beach, through which the water-sand mixture is pumped. At the discharge point, tractors and excavators spread the material, shaping the new profile, while topography and bathymetry monitor volumes and shorelines. The basic environmental plan worked with a schedule of 8 months of main construction, plus 2 months of pre-construction and 2 months of post-construction, in addition to the provision of 21 environmental programs with continuous monitoring carried out for up to 36 months. By the way, this monitoring was significant. Artificial nourishment changes the local hydrodynamics, the way the waves break, and how the sand is distributed over time. After the sand, the second layer of the project came, the redevelopment of the waterfront in November 2023. Balneário Camboriú started a parallel project estimated at more than 1 million reais to expand the boardwalk, to create seaside gardens, leisure areas, kiosks, lighting, and exercise spaces along the stretch of about 6 kilometers. But the engineers quickly noticed a side effect of the new layout. During certain high tide and storm surge events, puddles, ditches, and even temporary lagoons began to form on the newly widened stretch of sand. Scenes from 2022 showed these natural pools after storm surges, with water accumulating in depressions in the landfill. The response came in August 2025 with the start of construction of a new structural component, the underground wall, installed in a section of Rationale. Built in excavated trenches with lowering of the water table, a base of stone, large rocks, and later concreting, the wall will serve as a containment barrier against erosion and infiltration of high tide toward the boardwalk. The method repeats the shoreline macro drainage project steps: excavation, underground water control, drainage structure installation, and a concrete element. The wall and re-urbanization are expected to be completed by March 2027. All of this proves that the construction process of beach widening doesn't end when the dredger leaves. It continues at a quieter pace with buried walls, galleries, drainage, and monitoring programs that need to follow the beach for years until the system achieves a new balance. To understand the scale of what happened in Balneário Camboriú, it's worth making a comparison in the case of the widening of Praia Central in Balneário Camboriú. More than 2 million cubic meters of new sand were used, enough to fill about 880 Olympic-sized swimming pools, or the equivalent of the load of almost 90 large cargo ships. To put this intervention on an international scale, let's compare it to Kansai International in Wayport, Japan. To build an artificial island over Osaka Bay, 180 to 200 million cubic meters of landfill were used. Therefore, the beach widening represents a very small fraction of this type of mega project, about 1/10 of the scale used in Kansai. But that doesn't mean it's insignificant in the context of a densely built urban shoreline. Over 2 million cubic meters is highly transformative. Now, in terms of investment, of reais spent on dredging and sand replenishment, the average cost is about 30 reais per cubic meter, which is competitive for beach nourishment projects by international standards. For comparison purposes, the same amount would allow the purchase of about 6 coastal patrol boats, with an estimated unit value of 10 million reais each, or finance a small maritime support fleet far beyond comparisons. After all, how does this project impact the local population and economy? 3 years after the start of the dredging, the question is no longer whether the widening would change the city, but rather how this change will take hold in the long term. At the border of the beach and boardwalk, the underground reinforced concrete wall serves as structural insurance for the sand and beachfront property investments. After all, it reduces the risk of localized erosion, helps control the behavior of the tide during extreme events, and protects the foundation of the redevelopment. On the environmental side, the buildings, the next few years will be decisive. The monitoring programs outlined in the PBA and the key insights from academic research will fine-tune the need for adjustments. Whether in new containment works, in policies for the use of the sand strip, or in environmental education, if they manage to balance large-scale tourism, coastal protection, and environmental conservation, Balneário Camboriú turns the widening into something bigger than just a one-off project, a Brazilian laboratory for how highly vertical cities can coexist with a changing coastline. The widening of Central Beach in Balneário Camboriú was not just a beautiful beach project. It was a strategic choice to expand the beach, safeguard the shoreline, and boost tourism in a city symbolic of the Brazilian coast. From the dredger Galileo Galilei to the walls buried beneath the boardwalk, the project shows how coastal engineering, urban planning, and environmental monitoring need to go hand in hand. Because when the city changes the coastline, it is in practice redesigning its own future. Thanks for watching until the end. What are your thoughts on this amazing project in Balneário Camboriú? Is it just a whim or an efficient strategy that will benefit the whole region in the medium and long term? Leave your opinion here in the comments. I'll stop here. A big hug and see you in the next video.